speaker and talk a little bit about our next session. Jim.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Ed. This certainly is a nice tent. Very nice. It's nice and cool. And we're very excited tonight. When we were lining up this program, this conference, we thought, who could we ask that could really fire up the crowd? Who is really on fire in America today? And we immediately thought that young Charlie Kirk and his friend and cohort, Candace Owens, I don't know if there's any two people who are more on fire in the conservative movement in America today than these two. I think you need to give a proper introduction. When you see Charlie on television, he's on 4 or 5 nights a week. On Fox, he's on during the day. Candace is on. I've never seen... Charlie is 24 years old. Charlie started Turning Point USA when he was 18. Charlie has built one of the largest conservative groups in the country, let alone youth groups, but one of the largest conservative groups in the country. This guy's 24, right? He told me a little bit ago that they have over 1,000 different chapters. So I believe it was 1,200, and I'm sure he can tell you more about it, in different schools and around this country. That's phenomenal. This is what this kid has done. And then you see him on TV, and he's just rattling off the facts, and pounding it. He's not apologetic. He's never apologetic. He just knows that Donald Trump is the greatest president in modern history in all time, right? I think we're living through an unusual time where we were so blessed that God blessed us and gave us this president we have at a time that America desperately needed him. And so Charlie has the president's ear. Charlie regularly meets with the president and offers advice, and I don't know what else they do in the Oval Office, anyway, we're just really glad that Charlie could make it. And and Ed, do you want to add anything?
No, that's good.
Yeah. So here's Charlie Kirk, guys.
Thank you. Hello. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much, Jim. What a great event this is, and thank you for having me. So many of you know that I travel the country with what I consider to be the most exciting and effective young voice in the country, Candace Owens. She's absolutely terrific and tremendous. You should give it up for her. We're in the middle of launching a project that, in essence, will break the back of the Democrat Party straight to the black community. And so we had to make a difficult decision. She's meeting with someone who makes some music, let's just put it that way. You could fill in the gap of who that is. And it required her time in another city just to extend that a couple more days. There's a lot of different people meeting in there. So she was supposed to be here today. She apologizes, but I'm happy to pinch it for her. But there's a huge announcement happening in a couple days with some very, very, very large names and some very big people. And you might remember back in March, Kanye West tweeted, "I love the way Candace Owens thinks," which kind of broke the media in half. And then Kanye said, "Oh yeah, you thought that was bad? I'm going to wear a Make America Great Again hat." And he said, "Oh yeah, I thought that was bad. And I'm going to say Donald Trump's the greatest president." And then he wrote a song about it. And so there's real movement happening in the black community. Candace Owens was the one that really started that movement. 36% approval rating in the black community for Donald Trump. Absolutely spectacular. So the really neat thing about the duo that Candace and I have is we're on the road 345 days a year. We give over 230 speeches a year, 80 of which on college campuses. And sometimes we're just put in this amazingly hard situation and dilemma of being two places at once. So I'm happy to pitch in. Sorry you don't get the Candace treatment, but you're gonna hear it from me tonight. So I'm born and raised from Chicago, Illinois. The fun thing about being from Illinois is we have term limits. It's a little different than most states. It's 1 term in office, 1 term in jail. So when we asked for our former governor's cell number, we actually mean his cell number. When we were meeting in the Illinois Central Republican Committee, we said, do we have a governor that could deliver the invocation? I said, no, Governor Ryan, he's in jail. We actually went through the whole list. We have more former governors in jail than not in jail. So that's a landmark achievement. My grandmother was a lifelong Republican from the north side of Chicago. She passed away in the mid-1990s, and she's been voting Democrat ever since. So you kind of see, you might ask, how on earth did a kid from Chicago at 18 years old end up doing what I'm doing? So the story of Turning Point USA is quite unusual. I did not get into the school of which I wanted to get into at the time, which was the United States Military Academy at West Point. And at the time, I thought it was the worst thing that ever happened to me. It ended up being the best thing that never happened to me. I persuaded my parents to allow me 6 months off before entering college, which ended up being 6 years. And I started Turning Point in my parents' basement and garage, which has now grown to over 1,300 college and high school campuses, over a $15 million annual operating budget, 120 people on staff, tens of thousands of students pass through our training conferences every single year, and amazing talent, like Candace Owens and Brandon Tatum and Kyle Kashuv and Anna Paulina, and these influencers that you see every day on television that just come up through our ranks that are reaching tens of millions of people on digital social media, actually creating that next generation of news and information outside of the CNN, the New York Times, and the Washington Post. And, as a 24-year-old, I say I'm the luckiest 24-year-old ever to live. I say every single day when I'm on a college campus, America is the greatest country in the history of the world. Some people, I get booed and I get heckled when I say that, but I'm a living embodiment of that very statement. Only in America could an 18-year-old with no money, no connections, and no idea what he was doing, but unlimited energy and a vision, start something from nothing, travel the country speaking at tea parties, local Republican groups, and AmVet posts, collecting $20, $30 per stop per person, and eventually grow that into a national organization to save the greatest country ever to exist. Only in America is that possible. A lot of the focus here during this conference has been on the political war, which is very important. I see Representative Andy Biggs and some of the great members in the House that are actually fighting. We need more of you out there. There's not enough. The political war is super important. I think as long as Nancy Pelosi stays as the spokeswoman of the Democrat Party, we have a fighting chance to keep the House. I think she's great. I think we should just allow her to speak all day, every day. And I love when President Trump said, "Happy birthday to the leader of the Democrat Party, Maxine Waters." I thought it was brilliant. It was just absolutely brilliant. She's wonderful. But the political war, that is every 2 to 4 to 6 years, very important. I'm invested in the much more important culture war. I'm not saying the political war is not important, but as the great Andrew Breitbart said, who I see lots of shirts and a lot of memorabilia, politics is just downstream from culture. And so when Andrew Cuomo stood on stage and he said America was never great, and he wasn't met with boos and he wasn't met with hisses, some people gasped. He said America was never great, and people were stunned. How could a sitting governor say that? I kind of say, I've been hearing that for 5 years on college campuses. That is mainstream orthodoxy on most universities, that students are told the following sentence, and it is indoctrinated into the next generation with such effectiveness. It is, America is a racist, bigoted, homophobic country illegally founded by stealing the lands of indigenous people and Native Americans to build a society rigged against minorities to benefit the white supremacist, white majority ruling class that also happens to be misogynist. Woo! Like I say, it takes a doctorate degree to believe something like that. It's so stupid and screwed up. You have to spend an extended period of time at a university to possibly come to that conclusion. So I fight against this every single day, and I visit these college campuses and I talk to students, and we're very effective in fighting back against it. And what I find, the greatest piece of optimism I can give you today is it's not that students are opposed to what I'm saying. It's not that they say, "Oh, Charlie, we've heard this before," and they have great sound bites in return and rebuttal. It's they've never been exposed to these ideas in the first place. The top things that I hear is, "Charlie, how could it possibly be that America's a good country?" I've never heard that in my entire upbringing. And make no mistake, the public education system from preschool all the way up to the senior year of college is designed to not educate students, but instead to activate them into disruptive left-wing forces to try to destroy this greatest country ever to exist. And instead of teaching students that they should be thankful that we live in America, they teach students that they should be angry that they live in America. And that divide has never been more dramatic as it is today. In the 1960s and 70s, the Democrat Party of old, there used to be actually widespread agreement in most mainstream Democrat politicians that America was indeed the greatest country in the world, and that there was disagreement about how to run government. That no longer exists. Patriotism and the idea of America has now become a 50-50 political issue. That's so beyond dangerous, it's hard to even put into words. When 53% of young people say they're not proud to be an American. And look no further, when Barack Obama was president, I was just as proud to be American as I am today. Because my patriotism and my love of America is not determined based on who's president of the United States. My love and my pride to be an American has not increased since Donald Trump has been president. I'm more confident in our future, but I believe in ideas and I believe in our history and I believe in what we've been able to do and the good we've done for the world. Now, Democrats are the exact opposite. When polled, 54% of Democrats said they were proud to be an American when Barack Obama was president. Now it's down to 18%. See, they judge their love of America or lack of love of America based solely and simply if their political party is occupying the White House. And that shows that they don't actually ever love America. They just love to be in control of America. See, all the left wants to do, once you study the American left and you fight them the way that I have, and trust me, I've fought them, or they've tried to fight, they throw stuff at me, all sorts of fun things, you start to realize what really drives these people. Now, the followers, I feel quite sorry for most of them. Most of the followers are well-intentioned people that are corrupted by an angry, envious, destructive agenda. And at the very core of what a leftist is, not a liberal, there's a big distinction between the two, and I'll build that out in a second. But a leftist, which is someone who believes so dogmatically in the destruction of the Western civilization idea, is they believe in themselves. They have so much dissatisfaction in their own existence. They have so much unhappiness in their own life and their own series of choices that instead of improving themselves, they must destroy externally. And you see this time and time and time again. This is why leftists in California have now think they're going to find happiness by banning plastic straws, which to them, it's their way to virtue signal to the rest of the world, which I get such a kick out of this one because I just came from California yesterday. And so I went into a restaurant, I tried to ask for a plastic straw, and they said they couldn't give one to me because they no longer have one. I said, that's interesting. I said, so how does this work? If like an illegal alien uses a plastic straw, can we deport them then? Is that finally a deportable offense? Or what happens if I use a plastic straw in a sanctuary city? Is that okay to defy that sort of federal law? Nevertheless, I digress. The left at its very core is a group of people that are so dissatisfied they could not have made it in a market economy, could not have made it in a free and fair society, and instead they have to try to do everything they possibly can to prevent every single one of us to live the way we want to live. The old extolled virtue of the classical liberal, if you will, in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, people that used to consider themselves liberals, were like Louis Brandeis, who would say, I might disagree with you, but I'll fight to the death for you to be able to say it. That is dead. A leftist does not believe in that. That's why you have seen the crusade and the death of free speech on college campuses. Because for them, the ends justify the means. And I mean that in the most literal sense. For them, all moral is relative. There is no such thing as absolute truth. There is no such thing as objective standards. There's no such thing as one culture being better than another culture. And this is rooted in the most corrosive, cancerous ideology that is taught to every single young person that passes through a public school, which is called post-structuralism or postmodernism, which is rooted in the Frankfurt School. And there's a lot of philosophy behind that, but I can boil it in a very, very short period of time as the following. They believe there's no such thing as absolute truth. They believe that everyone has their own version of truth, more specifically based on your racial identity group. They believe in what I call the oppression Olympics. They hate it when I say that, but essentially it's a competition of who can be the biggest victim. And so, for example, you are looking at right here, I am the worst thing that could possibly exist. I'm a white, Anglo-Saxon, Christian, heterosexual male. Whoa, there's nothing I could possibly do for the rest of my existence to wrong the fact that I possess all these things, of which I did not choose. I did not go through a buffet line at age 6 and say, yes, I'd like to be all these things. Well, the Christian part I did choose, but that's okay. The other part I didn't choose. Now, the left, they look at me and they say, you are evil because of all these sorts of things, because of the oppressed versus the oppressor paradigm. This is how they're able to justify calling Candace Owens a Nazi. Because it's so perplexing to me. She gets called Nazi more than I do. I said, you realize like a core tenet of Nazism is hating black people, right? Like that's sort of a big thing. But to them, to leftists, when they look at a black conservative, that person no longer is black, it's just a conservative. You see that time and time again with their treatment of Dr. Ben Carson, or Alan West, or Herman Cain, or any of these black conservatives. They don't allow them into their ranks because their idea of racial identity is also rooted in leftist ideology, and they think those must too be the same. You have heard it said on MSNBC, and you've heard it said a lot, that I don't see any way a black person can be a conservative. There's nothing more racist in that statement than saying someone must think something because of their skin color. That is a racist idea in and of itself. It's saying you look a certain way, therefore you must think a certain way. It is directly contradictory to the e pluribus unum dream of all out of many one that have been taught throughout the last 230 years of our republic, and that Martin Luther King fought for. He said, I dream of a day that people are judged by the content of their character, not by the color of their skin. Yet at University of Missouri, which is a total mess and disaster, they have black-only dormitories. Can someone explain to me how that's not perniciously racist? You can't. Now, why is this? Going back to my original point, all the left cares about is control. That's all they care about. So how can they control massive groups of people? Divide them. And we've come to a point in American society where if you make a sequence of good choices, primarily you get married before you have kids, you get a job at an early age, and you graduate high school, you're almost guaranteed to live out of the bottom 20% of poverty in America and live in what we call the middle class. So we actually have the highest semblance of a meritocracy that we've ever had in American history. The left knows this and they understand this. So what do? They divide us on the most ridiculous and the most arbitrary lines imaginable, most specifically the racial lines. And they are the ones that are obsessed with trying to point out the quote-unquote racism on the other side when they are the ones actually possessing racism. There's nothing more racist than saying someone cannot think something based on their skin color. And so the objectives and the motivations of the Democrat Party have changed. And so growing up, this is the one piece of advice I have to all of you. Growing up, I was always told to never question the motivations of Democrats, that they want the same thing that we conservatives want, they just have a different way to get there. Who's heard this before? Almost everyone. That is completely and totally untrue. They don't want what we want. They want America that looks far, far different. And I'll give you one piece of evidence. The Congressional Black Caucus stood and applauded when President Obama said that we have record high people enrolling in food stamps. They thought that was a wonderful thing. They sat and looked upset when President Trump said we have the lowest ever black unemployment rate. Liberals need people to need them. As soon as the black community stops being so addicted to government benefits, they might not be Democrats any longer. And to them, that dissatisfies them, that troubles them. See, we as conservatives, we gauge success by how many people are getting off of government benefits, not how many people are getting on government benefits. To them, their whole worldview is based on how much stuff can we give out and how long can we addict that population to those certain set of benefits. To us, we would love to live in a society where we can get as many people off of those government benefits as possible and be self-reliant and self-sustainable. Two totally different worldviews. Now, do I think that there are good followers of Democrats? Sure, I think there's some good people that vote Democrat, but the leaders of the Democrat Party, I think, have sacrificed and have completely abandoned the auspices of good virtue and do not give it to them. What upset me the most is when Mitt Romney said, well, Barack Obama's a pretty good guy, we just disagree on policy. Hold on a second. Good people don't sell out America to Iran. Good people do, that doesn't happen. And what I love most about Donald Trump, when I always like to say that, Donald Trump's a much better president than I think America deserves right now, based on our pattern of behavior and based on how screwed up this country has become in so many different ways. We don't deserve a president this courageous, this strong, that stands up to both parties and does what he says he's going to do. President Trump is the first president in American history to be routinely attacked for doing what he said he was going to do. for actually fulfilling the promises he made to the American people. The thought process he goes is quite simple. I love all these exposing books that Woodward and all these hacks write. What's really behind his thought process? It's quite simple. What did I say I was going to do? And I'm going to do it. So, it's quite simple. And it doesn't take a whole forensic examination. So let's go through. Trade. I said China was ripping us off. I'm going to renegotiate trade deals. I said I was going to move the embassy. I did. I said I'd get out of the Paris Climate Accord. I did. I said I was going to get out of TPP. I did. I said I was going to give ICE more funding. I did. I said I was going to cut more taxes. I did. I said I was going to deregulate the economy. I did. I said I was going to put strong justices. I did. No other president, including President Bush, has actually fulfilled their promises as courageously and as routinely as President Trump has, yet he is attacked. Now, why is he attacked? Because the media wants him to betray those promises to the American people, because then he would fit the more globalist, leftist mold that they are comfortable with. The pattern disruption that he is going about, the change that he is making in D.C. with very few allies, and we need more of them, is so disturbing to the ruling class. Now, make no mistake, there's very little difference between the two American political parties right now. Now, the biggest difference would be the Democrats scream louder about impeachment and will probably vote unanimously about it, and the Republicans, for the most part, won't vote it because President Trump's the most popular Republican president since World War II. Now, most Republicans have contempt for the president. Most Republicans really don't like him because he's breaking all the rules. They still want their crony backslapping deals. They still want to run D.C. business as usual. And he says those three words, drain the swamp. It terrifies many Republicans because they don't want the swamp to be drained. They want it to be expanded and to be protected and to be ignored. Look no further. Back in the 1970s, the cities that had the highest economic activity and the highest wealth, the counties that were the richest counties in America, were around Philadelphia, Detroit, and Chicago. Essentially cities that made stuff, made automobiles, railroad cars, and invested in capital infrastructure. The wealthiest counties in America, 8 out of 10 of the wealthiest counties in America, are around Washington, D.C. So we went from a country that rewarded hard work, good behavior, and middle-class type jobs to now how close are you to power, your geographic proximity to the capital, access, and crony deals. What does Washington, D.C. create of value? They don't. They create liabilities for everyone in this room. See, when you go to work in Chicago, unless you work for the city of Chicago, goodness gracious, let's say you go to work for Boeing, every day you have to create an asset or else you're going to go out of business. If you go to work for the State Department or for, even worse, the IRS, you have to create a liability to keep your job. So you have to send a letter to another taxpayer. You have to send an audit request to another business. You literally have to make life more difficult for the people that are living outside of D.C. And so the divide that has grown in America is the ruling class in both parties that are perfectly comfortable with government getting to its size that it has, and those of us that actually live in the middle part of America between Manhattan and Malibu, the states that Donald Trump, actually visited, that the media calls slow-petted or flyover country or racist or deplorable, all those wonderful words that you cannot govern a country you've never visited, by the way. And I always I ask these leftists, have you ever actually been to these states that you have so much contempt for? And the answer routinely is no. And the middle parts of America have been so siphoned out by the elites that have been perfectly comfortable with keeping the status quo as is. And this is exactly what Donald Trump is disrupting, and that's why they have so much difficulty reconciling with it. So I believe in 3 big things that I bring to college campuses, and these things have been considered to be radical, revolutionary ideas by the left-wing press. Number 1, I say definitively and unapologetically that America is indeed the greatest country in the history of the world. That should not be a controversial statement. We are the most benevolent, the most creative, the most generous, the most productive, the most upward thinking, by far the greatest country ever to exist, bar none. We're 5% of the world's population, yet we comprise 80% of the world's economic activity. When there's a typhoon or a tsunami or a hurricane or a war breaks out, they don't call Belgium, they don't call Bolivia, and they definitely don't call Singapore. They call the United States of America. And as long as America is strong, as long as America is present in the world conversation, the world will continue to be a relatively safe and peaceful place. The world is a safer, better place since 1950 because of a strong America than lack of one. And if you challenge a liberal and you say, is the world better or worse off because of a strong America? And if they're honest with themselves, the answer is 100%. When America is strong, when America is creative, when America is generous and is allowed to produce, the world is a better place. 7 billion people live in relative peace thanks to America's leadership than not. If we withdrew from these parts of the world, if we stopped actually being the leader, you would see an unrepairable amount of pain and suffering. So number two, the Constitution is the greatest political document ever written. That's the second thing I said. Ever. And it was so ahead of its time. The number one myth about the Constitution, somehow it's rules for citizens. It's not. It's rules for government. It prevents government from actually getting into our life. It's the first political document ever to be instituted to tell the government what it could not do to us. The First Amendment, it recognizes the natural right to speech. I always like to say there would be no First Amendment without the Second Amendment. Your right to privacy, the Fourth Amendment, so on and so forth. The third thing that I bring to college campuses is I say the free enterprise system is the most moral and effective economic system ever discovered to allow the most amount of people to break out of poverty into prosperity. Very, very simple, right? And that's directly under attack. So some quick facts. I meet more Marxists on college campus than I meet Democrats. I meet more Marxists than I meet conservatives at times on college campuses. The phrase "America was never great," I hear that than I actually hear or see pro-American, paraphernalia or symbolism. The destruction that the university system has done to this country cannot be overstated. It is systematic indoctrination, and it is undercutting every core value that we hold near and dear. As I give this speech right now, there are millions of students sitting in lecture halls right now that are being indoctrinated to hate the greatest country ever to exist. This week, we lost another probably 30,000 students that will never get back. At University of Florida, UC Berkeley, UCLA, CU Boulder, and they came with the best intentions, but they were taught by an elitist professor class that is very, very good at manipulating history, at preying on students that, quite frankly, think they're being taught by the world's best and the world's greatest thinkers, which is anything but that. If you look at what most professors are, they've actually never lived in the real world. Most of these professors have utter contempt for the country, utter contempt for Judeo-Christian values, so on and so forth. So it is my daily mission to try to change this, and I've never been more optimistic about the future of this country while equally recognizing the concern. And it's more than just colleges. It's high school, it's K through 12, it's Common Core, it's all those things that we have allowed for far too long. And I fight against Antifa multiple times a month. I stare leftist activists in the eyes and I see what drives them. And the big divide, as I said right now, is those of us that are thankful to live in America and those of which that are angry to live in America. And if I had to distill what the university teaches more than anything else, they teach a generation how to be angry. And that's not said enough. And forget all the philosophical stuff, but they're really good at teaching young people to be angry. Well, there's some things that don't actually warrant anger. There's some things that warrant gratitude. In fact, I think gratitude, out of all the fruits of the Spirit, is one of those that gets overlooked. Thankfulness is in there. Gets overlooked because once you're thankful, it's really hard to complain after you're thankful. Once you're thankful, it's hard to do negative choices after you're thankful. But when you're angry, really bad things happen after anger. Contempt, destruction, envy, greed, so on and so forth. And from there, you can start to see the type of behavior that the left engages in. Now, when you have that divide, what concerns me the most is that there should be unanimous consent amongst the American people that we are indeed the greatest country ever to exist. And I never thought that we would accept these sort of national anthem kneeling protests the way it did. I don't watch the NFL anymore, by the way. I've completely tuned out. I think that they can go create themselves into a social justice activism boot camp. Only in America could an athlete get his whole college education paid for, learn nothing, get drafted in the first couple rounds of the NFL, make millions and squander that money away, come and start for an NFL team and completely ruin a franchise, have multiple tryouts based on his horrendous game film and more opportunities than you could ever imagine, then get cut from every team, protest against something that doesn't exist, create a fabricated movement and still get paid by Nike throughout the whole thing, than play the victim and blame it all on racism. Only in America is that possible. And we're perfectly, we continue to tolerate that sort of lifting up of victimhood. And this is the final thing I'll say, then I'd love to open up for questions, is there's two ways to deal with adversity. You can deal with it from a victor standpoint or a victim standpoint. The left loves victims, because as soon as you believe you are a victim, you believe you're entitled to something, especially somebody else's something, someone else's money, someone else's time, someone else's treasure. If you believe you're a victim, you believe that you're entitled to help other people. Victor, you're entitled to help other people. Two totally different ways to look at it. So I'm a victim, therefore I need reparations, I need free health care, I need free tuition. And they're very, very good at teaching a generation that has it really, really well, that they are victims. I'll give you a quick story on this. Candace Owens and I are the only conservative duo to ever speak at Stanford, UC Berkeley, and UCLA within a span of a month and live to tell about it. And so we were at Stanford. I repeat, we were at Stanford, and a student came up and she said, "You guys don't know what it's like to be a victim in America." I said, "Well, hold on a second. What are you talking? I said, "Okay, finish." And she said, "It's just so hard being a woman in America. You know, it's just so difficult, and this whole pablum, you know, about the patriarchy, which is so false." I'll get into that in a second. The patriarchy doesn't exist, but that's beside the point. And I said, let's just like, I want to make sure I'm getting my facts straight. You do go to Stanford, right? Stanford. And she's like, "Yes, it's very difficult. I feel like a victim here." So, oh, okay. Only in America could you go to a top 5 university as a spoiled, entitled suburban girl and then try to tell me that you're a victim and try to make a compelling argument. I said, "I never had the chance to go to Stanford. I just didn't make the most of it." She said, "It's just so difficult because of the rigged patriarchy." I said, "Oh, okay, the patriarchy." I said, let's go through the facts. Women comprise 54% of all college graduates, 63% of the doctorate degrees. Men commit 80% of the suicides. Most battlefield fatalities are all men. Most bankruptcies are men. Most prisoners are men. Most mental health cases are men. Women are much higher in a financial condition than men. In the urban cities, women are between the ages of 20 and 35, women out-earn men by about 18%. There's a huge problem right now between men between the ages of 25 and 30. And I said, "Wait a second, you're going to Stanford. Like, what exactly is a man preventing you from doing what you want to do?" And finally it concluded where she said, "It's just so difficult, you'll never know." And I said, "That's exactly right. I will never know." And so it's a badge of honor. And the final story I'll tell you about victimhood is we went to UCLA a couple days after, and Candace was in a kind of back and forth with a Black Lives Matter protester who was programmed to oppose everything that Candace said. No matter what Candace said, Candace would say, "Beautiful oxygen, wonderful, wonderful oxygen." She would, no matter what Candace would have said, they just would have opposed. So Candace said, "I believe in all of you. I believe you can make better choices, and I think that if you make a series of good choices, you can succeed in America." And this one protester said, No, that's not true. Stop it. You can't do it." And Candace said, No, I'm going to repeat it. "I believe in you. I really think you're great. I believe that tomorrow can be better than today." "Stop it. Stop believing. No, stop it." Candace said, "Fine, I don't believe in you." Thank you. Wait, hold on. What? You don't want us to believe in you? It's so screwed up. And that finally hit home that if you wear victimhood as a badge of honor, you're never going to run out of people to blame. And you exist in this permanent cycle of self-destruction and trying to have other people to take care of your own series of choices, your lack, therefore, of good choices. So, in closing, before I open up for questions, the thing I do have to mention is the thing that bothers me the most, even more than the rise of Marxism and the rise of victimhood and all this, and I think it's all tied together, is the rapid rise of atheism on college campuses. So I am an evangelical Christian. The Bible is the greatest book ever written. 66 books, 35 authors, greatest book ever. It doesn't get talked about enough. And even from a secular perspective, it's very hard to say the Bible is the most improbable book ever to exist. Very hard to make that argument. 5,000 years of history, the most important person ever to live, ever to exist, whether you believe he's the Son of God or not, it's pretty hard to make an argument to say he wasn't the most important person ever to walk the face of the earth. Yeah, that's the one. It's the most read, most translated, most impactful book in human history, but it's also the most banned and the most burned and the most banished. Interesting. Well, most college students will never even come in contact with the Bible, even in a historical text capacity. It takes intentional removal to try to get the Bible not to be taught in the widespread way it is. The Communist Manifesto is the #1 most assigned and most read book on college campuses. And so I'll tell you a quick story about it, but the rise of atheism is directly connected with the rise of the amoral behavior and the rise of socialism and Marxism, because as soon as you believe there's no God, you could do whatever you want. You remove God from the equation, then all of a sudden something has to replace it, and government replaces God in that equation. It's the deification of government. The last thing I'll say is this. I talked to a professor, and he came to one of my events. He said, Charlie, you can't possibly, actually believe in the fairy tales of the Bible, blah, 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 all the typical atheist stuff. I said, okay. I said, but do you teach the Bible in your class? He was a historical text professor or something. And he said, oh, no, absolutely not. I would never teach that. I said, okay, but even if you think it's all balderdash or nonsense, you can't believe that that the book was not assembled, that this just doesn't exist. It's like putting your own value imposition on the class. And he said something I'll never forget that sent chills up my spine at the end of the conversation. He said, no, I would never teach it because people might start believing it. And that's your answer right there, is that they don't want it to be taught because they know that people might actually start to believe it. Because they're trying to impose their own value system. And I always say atheism is indeed a religion. And they evangelize with more enthusiasm and vigor than us Christians do at times. 3 things to remember about atheists. Number one, the one thing that really frustrates them. Well, first thing I say is I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. I say that commonly. I refuse to believe that all of this world that we live in, the natural order, the math, the physics, the science, the biology, is all an act of randomness. Believing this is all by mistake takes a lot more faith than believing an intentional designer or creator, if you ask me. Number 2, this one really upsets them. I say, without God, there would be no atheists. Right over their head. You want to see atheists just twirl. Can't possibly take that one. Number 3, the most important thing is I ask them this question. I say, do you hope you're wrong? And atheists that say, no, I hope I'm right, I say, wow, so you actually want to believe in something so badly that it will not benefit you, that you value your own being right over what is right. And they say, what do you mean? I say, you don't want to see your loved ones after you die? You don't want to believe in ultimate justice? You don't want to believe that there's a higher power, that there's mercy and love and forgiveness, and that there's some sort of bigger power over all this? That you would rather be correct than actually have something good happen? And they say yes. I say, wow, okay. I don't have that kind of hubris, but God bless you. And when you say God bless you after that, they're really over their head. But the atheists that say, no, I hope I'm wrong, but I believe I'm right, then there's an opening. Then we just have a conflict about the argumentation of God and making the compelling argument for it. And that's the big distinction. I get the answer more commonly, no, I hope I'm right, which goes to the final point about atheism, is they believe so firmly in themselves, they've turned themselves into God. And that's really at the core of atheism, is that I have become God, no decision I make can be wrong, I can do what I want, I can do all this sort of promiscuous behavior however I want, whenever I want to do it, and no one can tell me any different. That in and of itself is a very, very evil way of thinking. And so I'm very troubled by that, because I think they're all interconnected. Yes, we're in a political war. Yes, we're in a cultural war, but we're equally in a spiritual war. And when we can't even have the common denominator, where most of my audience I talk to, 60-70%, don't even believe in God, we got a serious problem. Because then we're arguing from such a totally different moral pretense that it's difficult to even have the starting of a conversation. So with that, we'd love to open up for some questions and have some dialogue. So yes, thank you. I think we have a mic too.